out of New York. On the left-hand side of your screen, that's a courthouse in Lower Manhattan, where the judge in that case essentially tossed out a bid from Trump's team to dismiss that case altogether. In case you're wondering what case, because it is hard to keep track, this is the hush money porn star paperwork to cover the whole thing up financial crimes case. Probably the least interesting of all four cases, but it became a lot more significant minutes ago because now a judge has said this trial will proceed on March 25th with jury selection. So for the first time in American history, we will now have a president, a former president, stand trial in this criminal matter in Manhattan. So that is huge news that broke in the last hour. So we're keeping a close eye on both of these cases for reasons we've just kind of walked through. Meantime, we have a guest to go over it all.
Yeah, so here with his legal expertise is former federal prosecutor Robert Mitz. Thank you so much for joining us. So the judge just ruled he is not dismissing the case, as Rob was just mentioning, and that will start on March 25th for jury selection. So what does this mean, big picture, for the former president as we're watching the political and legal calendars collide here?
Well, it means that the trial in Manhattan will go forward at the end of March. It's a criminal case, so unlike the civil case that's been proceeding in Manhattan, the former president will have to attend every day of that trial. And the charges include 34 counts of falsifying business records that the Manhattan DA has elevated to felonies by tying it to the commission or the concealment of another crime. In this case, the other crime was a federal campaign law violation. And that was the thorny legal issue that the Trump defense team focused in on, among other issues, in trying to get this indictment tossed out before going to trial. But the judge, as you said, has ruled today that the trial will go forward on March 25th. And so we will see for the first time a former president sit in a courtroom where he's charged with a crime, a felony crime in the state of New York.
And obviously this is both legally, politically, and historically fascinating for reasons I think most people understand at this point. But in layman's terms, of the four cases that Trump is facing, this was the first one announced. It was a big day in New York. We'd never seen a former president indicted. Now it appears it will be the first to go to trial. But let's talk like people talk at the coffee shop or in the bar room. This is the least interesting of the case. I'm not speaking whether it's a crime, not a crime, guilt or innocence. But compared to election interference and classified documents and RICO, this is the small potatoes case. And there's always been this theory, as you alluded to, that the DA made a stretch in this case to up the charges here. I'm wondering if you agree with that narrative. And once this thing really gets rolling at the end of next month, is there a strong case here, and will it wrap up before November?
Well, I agree with everything you said. This really was kind of a worst case scenario for prosecutors, given the four criminal cases that are out there pending. Everybody expected that the federal criminal case in the District of Columbia, where former President Trump is charged in connection with the January 6th insurrection, that was supposed to be the trial that was going to go first. The Manhattan DA agreed to step down, even though, as you said, that was the first case indicted. But the federal case has been bogged down in appeals. The former president and his legal team have made the argument that the president is immune from those charges. That case is now working its way through the courts. The Federal Court of Appeals in a three-judge panel unanimously rejected that argument. Former President Trump and his legal team have now sought appeal to the United States Supreme Court. We'll wait to see whether the Supreme Court hears that case. But because of that appellate delay, the judge in District of Columbia had to adjourn her early March trial date, which then moved this Manhattan DA case up to the first one to go. And it really was probably the worst case scenario for prosecutors, as I said, because it was a case that not only was probably the most problematic from a legal standpoint, but it is, as you say, sort of the least significant from a public policy or public perception in the minds of average viewers. You know, they look at what happened in that case. Manhattan DA's case is basically the allegation that money was used to cover up this alleged affair, and that it basically turned that into a campaign contribution, and it's a business records violation. Meanwhile, the other charges were much more serious. You know, one, as I mentioned earlier, tied to the January 6th insurrection, the other involving the misuse, mishandling, and the concealment of alleged classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Those are the cases that are more easy to understand, and I think in the minds of the public, something that appear to be more serious than the case that's going to trial first. But this is the way it's playing out, and we'll see this trial go forward. And I think there is a good likelihood that at the end there'll be a conviction, but then many of the legal issues that were decided today by the trial judge will go up on appeal, and we'll have to see once again whether the legal foundation of the Manhattan DA's case stands up on appeal.
And as many have said, the last day of trial is really the first day of appeal.
Right.
So even when it looks over, it's really not. And again, obviously this is all interesting politically, so just as an exclamation point, by the time this trial begins, Donald Trump more than likely will be the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party after we get past Super Tuesday in early March. So literally 2.5, 3 weeks after Super Tuesday, this will begin in Manhattan, not just for former president, but presumptive nominee again, Donald Trump.
Right.
And again, as you said, the collision of political and legal is fascinating and historic. We've never been here before, but away we go. Former federal prosecutor Robert Mintz, thanks for your time and insight. Please come back. More news after this.